The Razors would have a hard time arresting anyone with a single handcuff. Good luck knitting that ugly Christmas jumper with only one needle. And as if a solitary kid-caught finger could ever last your entire tea break, the particular pair we're interested in, though? The two cameras pointing out the back of the Apple iPhone 7 Plus. What used to just be a plus-sized version of the vanilla iPhone has now fully stolen the spotlight from its smaller brother, thanks to some clever camera tech. Combine it with all the other tweaks and upgrades Apple has made for 2016, and you're going to find yourself needing bigger pockets, because this is now the best iPhone out there. There's only one thing that matters about the Apple iPhone 7, and that's its lack of a headphone port. Everything else is irrelevant except that's utter balls, obviously. That missing hole is a big deal, sure, but so are the improvements to the camera, the blistering speed of the new A10 processor, and the changes to the home button. In fact, to let any one feature dominate this review, whether good or bad, would be entirely out of keeping with the phone itself, which is the archetypal sum of its parts. Some of the additions here may seem quite minor, but added together, they equal a surprisingly different beast from last year's iPhone XS. The iPhone SE is an apology in the shape of a smartphone. Remember the iPhone 5C? Apple's first cheap handset was as close as it's ever come to a dud. Well, in the last decade at least. Too expensive for the folks it was aimed at and too underpowered compared to any other handset at the same price. The 5C never really caught on and was effectively nixed within a year of its launch, so here's the SE, Apple's second crack at the affordable smartphone whip. And do you know what? It's an absolute banger. The cheapest iPhone ever made packs pretty much all the power of the iPhone XS into the 4-inch aluminium shell of the iPhone 5s. Get a hold of the thing and it feels like value for money, rather than a step backwards for 5's owners who just wanted to stick with a smaller handset. For a phone of such slight stature, the SE is uncompromisingly current. Apply this theory to HTC and, on first glance, it's not quite so rousing. For starters, this is a multi-billion-pound company we're talking about. More importantly, the smartphone manufacturer is in a hole of entirely its own making. Last year's One M9 fell some way behind the flagship pace thanks to a shonky camera, while its One A9 cousin was a cynical attempt to ape the iPhone 6s design. It's at this point in any self-respecting blockbuster that a hero arrives to save the day. So here it is, the HTC Ten. Far from being draped in lycra, bulging muscles, and a bleach-white grin, this handset is as unassuming as you could expect for something priced just shy of £600. You see, the HTC Ten is a phone without a central innovation or gimmick, depending on your point of view. That means it lacks waterproofing, an always-on display, a wide-angle camera, 3D touch-like screen technology, and any kind of concessions to modular build. Name a recent trick from the Samsung Galaxy S7, LG G5 or iPhone XS and the chances are this competing device doesn't offer an equivalent. Nevertheless, it's still a great smartphone. Combining thoughtful design with a top all-round performance, the HTC Ten shows what's possible when you polish your tech fundamentals until they gleam. Don't call it a commub. Oh, go on then. The Moto G phone's designs have always come across better in person than they do on paper. They're all pretty thick, chunky things, but their palm-hugging curves make that a non-issue. Motorola couldn't afford to try the same trick here though. Thanks to its 5.5-inch screen, the Moto G4 is a flat-out big phone. To compensate, the classic Moto curve on the rear has been flattened, making the phone 9.8mm thick rather than 11.6mm. It's no waif, but if it hadn't trimmed down, it'd feel like holding a baby hippo. Sort of. Design standards have been tweaked too. It's not made of aluminium and unicorn tears, but there's now a metal effect trim around the camera and the style of the back cover has been switched from pretty plain plastic to a plastic with a cross-hatched rubberized texture. Like chocolate with salt in it, not everyone's going to like it from the off, but most will in the end. That said, there's one bit I'm not 100% sure about, the fake bling. The metal band around the sides of the G4 is actually plastic. In the old Moto G, the plastic bits looked like plastic and the metal bits like metal. I liked that. But it does look a bit better. If anyone can walk into a phone store and pick up a fantastic handset at random, then how is one device meant to stand out above the fray? Sure, you can make a better phone than last year's model with the best screen, the most powerful processor and the longest battery life, but that's all a bit boring. Isn't it? Splashing out on a second-hand Porsche never cured male pattern baldness, and jazzing up a camera sensor won't fundamentally change how a smartphone looks or works. That's why LG's G5 has undergone a full-on metaphorical hair transplant. Compared to its chief rival Samsung's Galaxy S7, the G5 is pretty much identical on first impressions. Both devices can make calls, send texts, and indulge your narcissism via the magic of social media. Dig a little deeper, and you'll find the two devices are radically different. That's because LG's new flagship phone is modular, allowing you to swap out its parts for improved ones, such as a bigger battery, physical camera controls, and Bang & Olufsen audio tech. Now that's what we call innovation, so much so that it's easy to get carried away with what the G5 is capable of, the ability to customize a phone so that it's even more suited to you. Amazing stuff, but what about the here and now? All that tech wizardry counts for nothing if the G5 isn't much cop to start off with. No pressure then. We're only talking about reinventing the smartphone as we know it. Arriving less than half a year after the OnePlus 3, the 3T seems as premature as Christmas decorations in September. So how's it any different? At first glance you won't notice any at all, apart from the new gunmetal color. It's still slim, all aluminium, and a real looker that can sit next to 600 pounds phones without looking even remotely cheap. Just like last time, you really have to dig to find the changes, like those tasty bits of brownie in a tub of Ben & Jerry's. First, the OnePlus 3T has a new Snapdragon 821 CPU. The last version had a Snapdragon 820, and this one is just a tad faster, 10% according to chip chef Qualcomm. Will you notice the difference day to day? Of course not, but Geekbench 4 shows there is at least a real change. The OnePlus 3T scores 4398 points, 1899 per core, the OnePlus 340 12. That's an increase of between 9 to 10%, just as promised. The same goes for Samsung's Galaxy S7 Edge. As the successor to our gadget of the year 2015, its core concept remains unchanged. It's basically the Galaxy S7 for really, ridiculously good-looking people. Sure, there's more to life than aesthetics, but not much more to that end. The S7 Edge is bigger and bolder than ever before. It takes the best smartphone you can buy and dolls it up that bit extra. This flagship Galaxy is rocking a larger screen and battery than its cheaper cousin, and you can do even more with its audacious curves if you've got the cash to burn. Then this Samsung is a smartphone worth flaunting. The company that stuck a huge 10x zoom lens on the Galaxy S4, made 7-gear wearables in less than 3 years and paid Jay-Z $5 million so that it could release his album for free? Well, those days are over. The Galaxy S7 heralds the dawn of a new era. Welcome to the age of sensible Samsung, a smartphone maker of dependable excellence. Its latest flagship handset is the technological equivalent of a Steven Spielberg movie. The whole thing just oozes with quality. Granted, this is not the most exciting gadget of 2016. Compared to LG's G5, the Galaxy S7 barely registers on the Richter scale of smartphone innovation. It looks almost identical to last year's Galaxy S6, but has a better camera and has brought back the Galaxy S5's water resistance and microSD card slot. If this all seems a bit boring to you, then fair enough. The Galaxy S7 doesn't offer an alternative take on Apple's pressure-sensitive 3D touch tech or the ability to upgrade your phone with modular wizardry. This smartphone is single-minded in its pursuit of simplicity, and it's this lack of bloat or overreach that serves it so well. I can't tell you to get the Galaxy S7 because it features a revolutionary new gimmick. Remember, this is a different kind of Samsung we're dealing with. You should get the Galaxy S7 because it's the best smartphone you can buy. Last year I took a look at a couple of last-wave Vodafone cheap A phones, the Smart Ultra and the Smart Prime 6. Both are great, but they aren't half bland. A few buyers must have let Vodafone know too, because despite being cheaper than either of those, the Vodafone Smart Prime 7 looks and feels fancier this time around. There's no magic to this. The phone still uses a pull-off plastic cover, but it now has an almost carbon fiber-like textured finish rather than an ultra-plain plastic one. This little tweak turns this from what might be an obvious no-frills phone into one you could easily mistake for a mid-ranger from one of the big names. It's slim, it's light, and it's not at all bad looking. There's more to the design upgrade than just the cover, though. Vodafone also wants the Prime 7 to look good on close inspection. Check out the little camera lens ring, for example. It's real metal. Real metal? On a 75 pounds phone. Is that a flock of pigs I spy overhead? The extreme edge of the screen is ever so slightly curved too, and the screen surround does a pretty good job of convincing you that it curves around smoothly into the sides. There are seams and contours on the Prime 7, but not a single hard edge in sight. Vodafone has new moves, and I like them. The Smart Prime 7 also has light-up soft keys. You got these in the Prime 6, too, but they've been trimmed down a bit to look less like they belong on a toy for 1 to 3-year-olds. Rarely does it seem quite as much like a phone maker has actually read all the criticisms of its phones, and then put the needed fixes in place.